The rain battered the streets of Brooklyn, a relentless drumbeat that drowned out the world. In a dive bar on Atlantic Avenue, Eli sat across from me, his green eyes catching the dim glow of a neon sign. He swore he was straight-had for years, but tonight, something in his voice cracked, and I knew the truth was clawing its way out. My name is Jamie, and I'd loved Eli since we were 16. Sneaking beers behind his dad's garage in upstate New York. Back then, he was the golden boy quarterback, prom king, the kind of guy who could charm anyone with a grin. I was the quiet one, the artist with paint-stained hands, always watching him from the edges. He dated girls, laughed off my hints, and called me his best friend. But I saw the way his gaze lingered sometimes, the way his hand brushed mine a second too long. I told myself it was nothing. I was wrong. That night in the bar, Eli was different. He'd been drinking whiskey, not his usual beer, and his words slurred with a weight I hadn't heard before. "Jamie," he said, leaning closer, "what if I've been lying? To you. To myself." My heart stopped. The air between us felt electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. I wanted to reach for him, to pull him into the truth. But fear held me back. What if he regretted it? What if he ran? We'd grown up in a small town where being different wasn't just hard, it was dangerous. Eli's dad, a pastor, preached fire and brimstone, and I'd seen the bruises on Eli's arms after he'd dared to question. I'd learned to hide who I was, too. But Eli, he'd built a fortress around himself, swearing he was straight to everyone, including me. Yet here we were, 23, in a city that didn't care who we loved, and his walls were crumbling. "Eli, don't say that unless you mean it," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rain. His hand trembled as it reached for mine under the table, his fingers brushing my knuckles. It wasn't an accident. It was a confession. "I mean it," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "I'm tired of pretending." The bar faded away. The world was just us, two boys who'd spent years dancing around the truth. I wanted to believe him, but I knew the cost. His family, his faith, the life he'd built, they'd all come crashing down if he stepped into this. And me, I'd risk losing him forever if this went wrong. But his hand stayed on mine, warm and steady, and for the first time, I let myself hope. We left the bar, the rain soaking us as we walked to my apartment. Neither of us spoke, but the silence was heavy with possibility. Inside, I offered him a towel, and he laughed and nervous. Broken sound. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, sitting on my couch, his wet hair clinging to his forehead. I sat beside him, close enough to feel his warmth. "You don't have to know," I said. "Just be here." He looked at me, and something shifted. His hand found my face, tentative, like he was touching something fragile. Then he kissed me. It was clumsy, desperate, and perfect. Years of longing poured into that moment, and I kissed him back, my heart racing with fear and joy. But as we pulled apart, his eyes clouded with panic. "What am I doing?" he whispered, standing abruptly. Before I could stop him, he was out the door, back into the rain. I stood there, alone, my lips still burning from his kiss. He'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. and I knew he was scared. But I also knew he'd be back. The truth, once spoken, doesn't stay buried. I sank onto the couch, my heart pounding, and waited for the storm to pass both outside and within him. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Eli. "I'm sorry. I need time." I stared at the words, my chest tight. I wanted to scream, to beg him to come back. But I knew pushing him would only make him run farther. Eli wasn't just fighting his feelings, he was fighting a lifetime of guilt, shame, and expectations. I typed "I'm here" and hit send, hoping it was enough. Days passed without a word. I threw myself into my art, painting feverishly in my tiny Brooklyn studio. The canvas became a mess of colors: blues for his eyes, reds for the anger I felt, golds for the hope I couldn't let go. I'd always used art to process what I couldn't say, and now it was all I had. But every brushstroke reminded me of him, of that kiss, of the way his hand had trembled against my skin. Eli finally showed up a week later, looking like he hadn't slept. His hair was a mess, his eyes bloodshot. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, standing in my doorway. "But I don't know if I can do this." His voice cracked, and I saw the boy I'd loved for years, caught between who he was and who he thought he should be. I pulled him inside, shutting the door against the world. We sat on the floor, backs against the couch, and talked. Not about the kiss. Not yet. But about everything else. He told me about the sermons he'd heard growing up, the ones that called people like us sinners. He told me about the nights he'd lain awake, hating himself for wanting something he couldn't name. I listened, my heart breaking for him. "You're not broken, Eli," I said. "You're just you." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "How do you do it, Jamie? How do you live like this, knowing what people think?" I shrugged, trying to keep my voice steady. "I stopped caring what they think. I care what you think." He didn't answer, but he leaned against me, his shoulder pressing into mine. It was enough for now. We started meeting in secret, stealing moments in my apartment or quiet corners of the city. A coffee shop in the village, a park bench by the East River, places where we could be invisible. Each time, Eli relaxed a little more, his smiles coming easier. We didn't kiss again. Not yet. But the air between us hummed with possibility. I could feel him inching toward acceptance. But I also saw the fear in his eyes whenever his phone buzzed with a call from home. One night, he showed up with a bottle of wine and a nervous grin. "I told my sister," he said, his voice shaking. "About me. About us." My heart stopped. His sister, Sarah, was the only one in his family who might understand. But it was still a risk. "What did she say?" I asked, bracing myself. He smiled faintly. "She said she loves me. Always will." Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. "She also said Dad's planning a visit. He wants me to come home for a church event." The weight of his words hit me hard. His father's church wasn't just a building, it was a prison of dogma that had shaped Eli's shame. If he went back, I wasn't sure he'd come out the same. "You don't have to go," I said, my voice fiercer than I meant. He looked away, his jaw tight. I don't know how to say no to him, Jamie. Not yet. I wanted to fight for him, to tell him he was enough just as he was. But I knew this was his battle, not mine. All I could do was be there, steady, when he was ready to choose. As he left that night, he hugged me a real hug, not the quick ones he used to give. "I'll figure this out," he whispered. I believed him. I had to. Eli didn't go home. Not yet. He told his dad he had work, a lie that bought him time but left him restless. We spent more nights together, talking until dawn, our conversations weaving between dreams and fears. He told me he'd always wanted to travel, to see places where no one knew his name. I told him about my art, how I wanted to paint something that made people feel seen. We were building something fragile but real, and I held on to it like a lifeline. One evening, we went to a queer open mic in the East Village. I'd been before, but Eli hadn't. He sat rigid at first, his hands clenched in his lap as poets and singers bared their souls. Then a trans woman took the stage, her voice raw as she spoke about finding herself. I saw Eli's eyes glisten, his shoulders loosening. When we left, he grabbed my hand in the street, his grip fierce. "I want to be that brave," he said. I squeezed his hand. "You already are." But bravery comes with a cost. His dad kept calling, leaving voicemails about the church event. Eli stopped listening to them, but I could see the guilt eating at him. One night, he showed me a photo of his family, his dad stern, his mom distant, Sarah smiling like she knew a secret. "They're my family, Jamie," he said. "But they don't know me." Not really. I wanted to tell him he didn't know them his truth, but I knew it wasn't that simple. We kissed again that night, slower this time, like we were learning each other. It felt like a promise, but promises are fragile when the world's against you. The next day, Sarah called. I heard her voice through the phone. "Urgent. Dad's coming to New York," Eli said after hanging up. His face was pale. "He knows something's up." Panic clawed at me, but I kept my voice calm. "What does he know?" Eli shook his head. "Sarah didn't say. Just that he's angry. He's coming tomorrow." My mind raced. His dad wasn't just a father, was a man who believed love like ours was a sin. If he found out, Eli could lose everything. "You don't have to see him," I said. Eli laughed bitterly. "You don't know my dad." We spent the night planning. Eli would meet his dad at a neutral Spoda diner in Midtown. I'd be nearby, just in case. "I'm not ready to tell him," Eli admitted, his voice small. "But I don't want to lie anymore." I pulled him close, my heart aching. "You don't have to do this alone," I said. He nodded, but his eyes were distant, like he was already facing his father's judgment. The next morning, Eli left for the diner, his hands shoved in his pockets. I waited at a coffee shop across the street, my stomach in knots. I watched him walk in, his shoulders squared like he was heading into battle. Minutes ticked by, then an hour. My phone stayed silent. I tried to focus on my sketchbook, drawing Eli's face from memory, but my hands shook. When he finally emerged, he looked wrecked. His dad stormed out behind him, his face red with anger. I couldn't hear their words, but I saw Eli flinch as his dad gestured wildly. Then his dad walked away, leaving Eli standing alone on the sidewalk. I ran to him, my heart pounding. "What happened?" I asked, grabbing his arm. He looked at me, his eyes wet. "He knows," he said. "And he hates me." Eli wouldn't talk about it at first. We walked back to my apartment in silence. The city's noise a dull roar around us. Inside, he sank onto the couch, his hands covering his face. He saw us. He finally said, "Last week, holding hands. Someone from his church was in the city. Took a photo." My stomach dropped. The moment we'd thought was ours had been stolen, turned into evidence against him. He called me an abomination. Eli continued, his voice hollow. Said I was choosing sin, that I was no son of his. I knelt in front of him, my hands on his knees. "You're not a sin, Eli. You're not wrong." He shook his head, tears falling. "Then why does it feel like I'm breaking everything?" I had no answer. Only anger at a world that made him feel this way. We stayed like that for hours. Him crying, me holding him. I wanted to fix it, to take away his pain. But all I could do was be there. Eventually, he fell asleep, his head on my shoulder. I watched him, his face soft in sleep, and vowed to protect him, whatever it took. The next day, Eli was quieter, but there was a fire in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "I'm not going back," he said. "Not to that town. Not to him." It was a declaration, but I knew it wasn't that simple. His dad had cut him off, no money, no contact. Sarah was supportive, but she was still in college, dependent on their parents. Eli was on his own, except for me. We started building a life together, small and tentative. He moved in, his clothes mixing with mine in the closet. We cooked dinners, laughed at bad movies, and fell into a rhythm that felt like home. But the shadow of his dad lingered. Eli jumped every time his phone rang, expecting another angry voicemail. I saw the toll it took, the way he second-guessed himself, wondering if he'd made the right choice. One night, we went to a gay bar in Chelsea. It was Eli's idea, a step toward embracing who he was. He danced with me, awkward at first, then freer, his laughter cutting through the music. For a moment, he was just Eli, not the pastor's son, not the boy who'd lied to himself for years. I kissed him under the flashing lights, and he kissed me back, fearless. But freedom doesn't erase the past. A week later, Eli got a letter from his mom. It was short, formal, begging him to come back to God. It broke him. He didn't cry this time, just sat staring at the words, his face blank. "They'll never accept me," he said. I took the letter, tore it up, and pulled him into my arms. "You don't need them to," I said. "You have me." He looked at me, his eyes searching. "What if I'm not enough for you, Jamie? What if I mess this up?" I cupped his face, my voice steady. "You're enough. You've always been enough." He kissed me then, softer than before, like he was starting to believe it. But I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Love was a start, but it wasn't a cure for everything he'd lost. Months passed, and Eli began to find his footing. He got a job at a bookstore, surrounded by stories that helped him make sense of his own. I kept painting, my work growing bolder, inspired by him. We were building something real, but the world kept testing us. Old friends from home reached out, some supportive, others judgmental. Eli handled it with a quiet strength, but I saw the cracks. One day, Sarah showed up at our door, her eyes red from crying. She'd fought with their parents, defending Eli, and they'd kicked her out. I couldn't stay there, she said, hugging her brother. Not after what they said about you. Eli held her, his jaw tight. I made up the couch for her, and we became a little family. 3 outcasts against the world. Sarah's presence changed things. She brought laughter, stories, and a link to Eli's past that wasn't all pain. She teased us about our domesticity, calling us an old married couple. Eli blushed, but I saw him smile in a way that reached his eyes. For the first time, I thought we might make it. But his dad wasn't done. A month later, Eli got a call from a family friend, saying his father was sick, heart problems. The guilt hit Eli hard. He's still my dad, he told me, pacing the apartment. What if he dies and we never fix this? I wanted to tell him his dad didn't deserve his forgiveness, but I couldn't. Do what you need to, I said, but don't lose yourself. Eli decided to visit, just for a day. I drove him to the train station, my heart heavy. I'll be back, he promised, kissing me quickly before boarding. I watched the train pull away, fear gnawing at me. What if his dad pulled him back into that world? What if he couldn't escape again? He called me that night, his voice strained. His dad was stable but unyielding, refusing to acknowledge Eli's life. He said I'm damning myself, Eli told me. But I told him I'm happy. For the first time, I'm happy. Pride swelled in my chest, but so did worry. He was standing up for himself, but at what cost? When Eli returned, he was different, stronger, but haunted. I'm done trying to please him, he said, his voice firm. I choose you. I choose us. We made love that night, not out of desperation, but out of certainty. It felt like a vow, one we'd keep no matter what came next. But life doesn't let you rest. A week later, we got a letter from his dad's church, disowning Eli formally. It was cruel, a final blow to sever him from his past. I expected him to break, but he didn't. He burned the letter in the sink, his hand steady. They don't get to define me, he said. I pulled him close, my heart full. He was free, but freedom always comes with scars. Eli started therapy, a step I hadn't expected but admired. He wanted to understand himself, to untangle the years of shame. I went with him sometimes, sitting in the waiting room, sketching while he talked. He came out lighter, like he was shedding layers of guilt. I'm starting to like who I am, he told me one day, his smile shy. I kissed him, my heart soaring. We began to dream bigger. I got a gallery show, my paintings of Eli drawing a small but passionate crowd. He stood beside me, proud, his hand in mine. Sarah found a job in her own place, but she was still our family, our anchor. We talked about moving somewhere new, maybe San Francisco, where the air felt freer. But New York was home for now. its chaos matching our own. One night, we hosted a dinner for our chosen family friends we'd met at bars, art shows, and open mics. The apartment was cramped. The food simple, but the laughter was loud. Eli told stories, his voice confident, his arm around me. I saw the boy I'd loved for years, but also the man he was becoming. He wasn't hiding anymore. But the past has a way of creeping back. A former friend from home, Mark, showed up unannounced. He'd been close to Eli's dad, and his eyes held judgment as he looked at us. "Your father's worse," he said. "He wants to see you." Eli froze, his hand tightening on mine. He had his chance, Eli said, his voice cold. Mark left, but the air felt heavier. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. "What if he dies, Jamie?" he asked, staring at the ceiling. "What if I never get closure?" I held him, my words careful. Closure doesn't always come from them. Sometimes it's about you letting go. He nodded, but I knew he was wrestling with it. The next day, he called his mom, hoping for a bridge. She hung up when he mentioned me. The rejection stung, but it also clarified things. Eli started writing letters he'd never sent, pouring out his anger, his love, his pain. I read one, with his permission, and it broke my heart. He wrote about the boy he'd been, the man he was becoming, and the love he'd found with me. "You gave me courage," he told me, his eyes soft. I kissed him, my throat tight. "You gave me hope." We decided to live louder. Eli joined a queer book club, his voice growing stronger with every meeting. I painted a mural in our neighborhood, a vibrant tribute to love in all its forms. People stopped to watch, some smiling, some whispering. We didn't care. We were done hiding. A year after that night in the bar, Eli was different. Not perfect, not healed, but whole in a way he hadn't been. We were planning a trip to Provincetown, a place where we could walk hand in hand without looking over our shoulders. But before we left, Eli got a call. His dad was in the hospital again, this time critical. Sarah begged him to come. "I don't want to," Eli said, his voice shaking. "But I need to." I nodded, knowing this was his to face. We drove upstate together, the silence heavy. When we arrived at the hospital, Sarah met us, her face drawn. "He's asking for you," she told Eli. I stayed in the waiting room, sketching nervously, my heart with him. Eli was gone for hours. When he came back, his eyes were red but calm. He didn't apologize, he said, sitting beside me. But he listened. I told him who I am, who I love. He didn't yell this time. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was something. A crack in the wall. I hugged him, my relief overwhelming. His dad died 2 days later. Eli grieved, not for the man who'd rejected him, but for the father he'd wanted. We went to the funeral, standing at the back, Sarah between us. The church was full of people who didn't know the real Eli, but we did. As we left, he took my hand, unafraid. "I'm okay," he said. And I believed him. Back in New York, we threw ourselves into life. Eli started writing, Short stories about love and loss that made me cry. My art was selling, and we saved for our future. We fought sometimes about money, about fears, but we always came back to each other. Love wasn't perfect, but it was ours. One night, under the Brooklyn Bridge, Eli proposed. Not with a ring, but with a promise. His voice steady. I want forever with you, he said. I said yes, tears in my eyes, and we kissed as the city hummed around us. It wasn't a fairy tale, it was better. It was real. We didn't have a big wedding, just a small gathering in a Brooklyn park, with Sarah, our friends, and the city as our witnesses. Eli wore a simple suit, his smile brighter than the sun. I wore my heart on my sleeve, my vows a promise to love him through every storm. When we kissed, the crowd cheered, and I felt the weight of our journey lift. Life after wasn't easy. Eli still carried scars, moments when doubt crept in. But he faced them, with therapy, with writing, with me. I kept painting, each piece a love letter to him, to us. We moved to a bigger apartment, one with space for Sarah to visit, for friends to crash, for a life we'd built from the ground up. Eli's stories got published, small presses at first, then bigger ones. He wrote about us, about the boy who swore he was straight and the man who learned to love himself. Readers wrote to him, saying his words gave them courage. I was so proud. My heart ached. My art hung in galleries, telling stories of love and resilience. Together, we were unstoppable. One day, we got a letter from his mom. Not an apology, but a steep photo of her and Sarah. A note saying she was trying. Eli cried, but they were good tears. Maybe one day, he said, and I nodded. Healing takes time, but it's possible. We went to Provincetown that summer, walking the beaches hand in hand. Eli laughed more now, his joy infectious. I sketched him against the ocean, capturing the man he'd become. You saved me, he said one night, his voice soft. I shook my head. We saved each other. Our story wasn't just about love. It was about courage, about choosing yourself when the world tells you not to. Eli had lied to himself for years, but the truth set him free. And me, I'd waited, hoped, and fought for him. Together, we'd built a life that was messy, beautiful, and ours. As the sun set over the water, Eli pulled me close. I'm glad I stopped lying, he whispered. I kissed him, my heart full. Me too, I said. And in that moment, under the endless sky, we were whole.